welcome to another podcast episode of Indigenous Roots and Hoots, produced by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. Indigenous Roots and Hoots is about Indigenous people and culture, past and present, success stories and inspiring stories about Indigenous people and what they are doing today. Whether it's arts, music, sports, business, education, and so on, Indigenous people are affecting positive change in their communities throughout Canada. Our aim here is to create a better awareness about Indigenous people to help bridge the gap of understanding for the reconciliation process in Canada to grow.
Hello and welcome to this podcast episode on Indigenous Roots and Hoots. I'm your host, Gordon Spence, and today my guest is Jennifer Wood. Jennifer is a survivor of the residential school system, now residing in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Over her career span, she has worked with various Indigenous organizations, dedicating her life to helping Indigenous people. She will talk about that today. Hello, Jennifer. Good to see you. Good to talk to you. How are you?
I'm good, Gord. How are you?
Good. So we'll just start by asking you about your family background, where you grew up, and your cultural identity. Tell us a bit about your community as well. So go ahead.
I come from a reserve in Southern Ontario. The English name is Cape Croker. Our Ojibway name is Neyaashiinigmiing. We are out on a Bruce Peninsula. We are 3.5 hours northwest of Toronto. We are in a beautiful community surrounded by the Niagara escarpment with 3 bluffs in our community. I come from a rich background. My grandfather was the first baby born on our community and later served for a chief for 46 years. And our First Nation's name is, we are Kigadons, which means orator. I have 12 members of my family. There were 7 sisters and 4 brothers, and I'm the youngest. And my mother left before I was 5, and my father was raising the rest of us. And he met a woman that came into our community, and she was a widow. And they connected, and soon after, we moved off the reserve and straight out to northern Manitoba, to Oxford House, Bonbonnaby.
That's kind of where you grew up. Tell us about Bonbonnaby. It's Oxford House. What's that place like?
Beautiful. I always tell everybody that's the most beautiful community in all the north. It has a beautiful lake, and it's almost up on a hill. And the people from Oxford House are very kind and warm and loving. And I have a really special place in my heart for Bonbonnaby. I was able to go out on the land with my dad to get wood by boat and out on the skidoo in the winter to get the wood in the winter. And I made lasting friendships that I still have today. They're very, very unique people.
Yeah. You're a survivor of the residential school system. What residential school did you attend? And describe to us what it was like growing up there.
Yeah. I was taken down to Portage Residential School in Portage la Prairie. It's an hour out of Winnipeg. I arrived there when I was 13, and that was in 1973. And, because the education wasn't up to my dad's standards, and they looked at Portage, and he took me down there. But when I went traveling with him, I had no comprehension of where I was going. I went along, and I was just, I don't know if I was in a daze or what. We drove to Portage and took in my luggage, and we met the house parent, and then he takes off his hat and he says, "Okay, I'll see you." So I said, "What do you mean? Where are you going?" And he goes, "Well, I'm going back to Oxford House." And I go, "And I'm staying here." And I had to keep repeating that. So I had to adapt real fast, and I had to really get a grip on my composure and how I'm going to survive and to live there. So I put on a very good positive attitude that I still have to this day, that I believe has taken me into my careers that I've been honored to have. And I made lasting friendships there. Of course, with any residential school, Gord, it is lonely because you're with strangers and you're shy and you're into a new system and you're going to school and you have to eat with everybody and do stuff with everybody when you're not used to that. So I made a lot of good friends from all over the north, from all over Manitoba. Actually, my best friend was from Norrie House, and my other one was from Brokenhead. We resided in the residence into town. So that was hard to adapt to because, my standard of education wasn't great. And I had a hard time in school, especially with math. I always tell people this. I wish I would just disappear so that they don't ask me any questions, because I didn't know the answer. And so I went through all of that, and we had good supports at the school. We got involved in sports activities. We went to hockey games. We had volleyball teams, basketball. We just kept busy, Gord. And I always tell people I closed down the school in 75 because we lost a lot of students. Every year we would lose students from Christmas time when the students were able to go home. A lot of them didn't come back. And then we went down to, don't quote me, but I believe we started off at 175 to 150 to 75. Like it just kept going down, and they made a decision to close down the school. And there was about 15 of us that stayed behind in Portage, and we boarded with house parents. Right. And I was very fortunate to be in with really good house parents, because later the house parents, Glenn Carlson, he actually was the industrial teacher at the local school, and he later became mayor of Portage.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was quite the time, and like anything, you're taken away from things that we could have learned from my father, who was an avid hunter, fisher. He was our linguist in our community. He spoke the language like no other. So right.
I was going to ask you, but you kind of answered it already. We've had as survivors, we went through a lot of stuff. Most of it was negative. The loneliness and being away from your family, your culture, the food, and the community that we were growing up in, taken away from that. And being away from your family was probably the hardest. And the loneliness setting in. Once you got there. And also, there was the abuse, physical, mental, emotional, sexual, all that happened in these various residential schools. But I was going to ask you, there were a lot of positive things that came out too, like you mentioned, we were involved in sports. Your school actually competed against my school, Dauphin, the Mackay Residential School. We used to see each other at track meets and volleyball tournaments and basketball tournaments and hockey tournaments.
Yeah.
And I remember we won actually a hockey tournament in Portage one year. So anyways, I was gonna ask you, talk about some of the positive things that came out. Is there one thing that stands out, that's something good, the good memory you have that's come out of your experience at Portage Residential School?
Yeah, the one thing that came out of Portage Residential School is that I formed really lasting good friendships that I still have to this day. And I grew fond of the house parents that we had in the school and the counselors that we had. I like getting used to the structure. I like the times, and I had duties, as we all did. We all had duties and jobs that we had to do on a daily basis, and then we'd rotate. So it formed a family for me, and I still have them very close to my heart. We were involved in a lot of sports. We The one good thing I remember is when we actually left the residential school and we're in town, we got to know the neighboring First Nations in Long Plains, and we started going down to the Friendship Center because we wanted to be with our people. And we formed a volleyball team because we wanted to go compete in Dolphin, I believe, or Niagara.
Yeah.
We went and found a bus driver. We found an old bus, and we got outfits made. They were mismatched, and we went to the tournament, and we came in, I believe, second place.
Wow.
So I remember that. We had a dance after, and I got most valuable player. I was shocked. I go, are they calling me? Everybody's looking at me. I'm sitting on the floor in the gym, and
Yeah.
they get up there, Jennifer, Jenny. They used to call me Jenny. Anyway, that was very memorable for me.
Yeah. Didn't you meet your husband there?
I did.
Darcy.
I did. We were best friends. I was 13. He was 16. And there was a group of us that hung around together. There were 5 of us. And we were, we always went everywhere together. And we were best friends. And then I moved on to Winnipeg because I had an aunt that lived here, Vera Martin. And Darcy stayed in Portage because he went to work at the Canada Employment Center. Yeah. And, then we bumped into each other in Winnipeg outside the theater on Portage and Memorial Drive. Literally bumped into each other.
Yeah.
At that time in Winnipeg, it was a lot of people downtown, a lot of people walking. Anyway, that was in I can't remember. But anyway, that's when we got together, and
the rest is history.
The rest is history. Yeah. We always tease each other. I didn't know I'd end up with you. He goes, I didn't know I'd end up with you.
That's good. That is awesome. Yeah. So many good memories. And, in spite of the hardships we went through in residential school, even myself, I forgot some good memories too. And, I got an education out of it and made a lot of good friends, lasting friendships, lifetime. Tell us about you're working at the Truth and Reconciliation Center now. Tell us about that organization and what you do there and what they do.
Well, the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation, during all the talks of the settlement agreement, they chose Winnipeg to have the National Center here in Winnipeg. And I remember clearly, because I worked on the file for 10 years, I remember thinking, this is so great because there was a lot of people that lobbied and worked so hard to have it here in Winnipeg. But the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation is responsible and accountable to be the steward for the experiences, the photos, the archives, the memories. They're entrusted with all this information to store and keep under, close watch.
What information? What stuff are you talking about?
Records, photos.
From where?
Statements from survivors.
Oh, okay.
From survivors, yeah.
Yeah.
They're the holders of all the records and archives. And they do them digitally, I believe. And they're looking at doing statement gathering. They do a lot of research. They have a lot of academics involved because it's alongside the University of Manitoba. And now with the new findings and burials of missing children, which galvanized the country, the National Center is getting a lot of inquiries and requests. I always tell people we're at the tip of the iceberg here at what we have to undertake and to ensure that it's done right. My role with the NCTR my title is the Commemoration and Community Liaison Officer. They have requested that I could head up the Neyaashiinigmiing Fund. It's a fund that is for survivors who wish to commemorate and honor their survivors in their community in any which way that they feel is best for them. It's for $10,000. You have to be a nonprofit organization to apply. You can't apply as an individual, a band office, school, health program. survivors group, as long as you're incorporated. We have a regional advisory circle that is made up of survivors across Canada that we meet with the applications when they come through. We screen them for the survivor circle, and we meet and we talk through them. But it's a really unique fund, and I believe what I've noticed with this fund, Namekwenamak Fund, which means I remember them, what I see is that it's bringing communities together. It's bringing everyone together on how they want to commemorate. We have survivors that are wanting to do healing gatherings. We have survivors that are doing quilting blankets. We have survivors that are putting on workshops to go back to what is important to them, the values and cultures. There's a lot of survivors that are looking at land-based education, going back to the land with the survivors. The key for this fund is that it is supported by survivors, endorsed by survivors, and that they are involved in the planning. So it's an ongoing fund. It's not a complicated fund. It's 3 pages long. And as long as you put your brief description, and answer the questions, it's pretty unique. So I'm really happy that the NCTR is offering this fund from Parks Canada, actually, through NCTR.
The funding that you received from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission or Center, is this like permanent funding, or is it just year to year?
It's not permanent, but it's ongoing. There's been a lot of donations that have come through NCTR, like Parks Canada approached NCTR and asked how they would like to help them. And they, talked about ways that they could, and they came up with this fund. So, and there's other things too under NCTR that it's called Imagine Canada. I believe that's more for people looking at reconciliation, non-Native people and First Nations individuals. So I'm really pleased, and I believe that a lot more will be coming through the doors of NCTR to administer and provide different funds for survivors. I believe it's going to be ongoing.
Right. Well, let's hope that Truth and Reconciliation continues to do its work. The good work that they do stays on, and many more years to come.
Mm-hmm.
You worked for the famous Indigenous Canadian Elijah Harper, a former MLA and MP who blocked the passage of the Beach Lake Accord. For those people who are not aware of this historic issue, give a brief summary of why Mr. Harper decided that this was not a good deal for Indigenous people.
Well, basically, they were attempting to amend the Constitution without First Nations people involvement. As you know, back in 1990, the amendments to the Constitution was started in 1987, and they had so many years to ratify it and pull it through the different provinces. Well, the date came by June. They had to have it ratified and passed through by June the 22nd. At that time, the former national leader, Phil Fontaine, former Grand Chief of AMC, former National Chief Ovid McCurdy, and all the chiefs of Manitoba, they got together and they were seeing the ongoing discussions of the Meat Lake Accord, that they had to have all the premiers of all the country involved. But the thing is, in the Constitution, they didn't have consultation with First Nations. And Quebec was attempting to become a distinct society. And, our leaders out here in Manitoba were watching all of this unfold, watching Brian Mulroney, past premier, and they got together and they started to strategize. And they knew that this would be coming to the Manitoba legislature. And you had to have unanimous consent of all the MLAs in order to pass this accord. And Elijah had a lot of pressure on him. All of Canada was watching, but with the backing and support of the Manitoba chiefs, he single-handedly held a eagle feather, and he said no. And it blocked the entire process. Historical baking into history. And lo and behold, he was displeased with the accord, and a lot of people watching, and the first one that attempted to not support it was New Brunswick, the then Premier Frank McKenna. But later on, he advocated for it. So it came down to Manitoba, and Elijah blocked it by 2 syllables. No, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, I remember that time. There must have been a tremendous amount of pressure on him. Was he the only one in MLA that said no?
Yes.
Well, yeah, and they made a film about that later on. I don't know where it's at now, but I wanted to ask you what Elijah was like during that time. He was always such a friendly person. Personality was, always friendly and welcoming, and such a gentleman. That's what I describe him. Being under so much pressure in the Canadian spotlight, the media there all the time. What was it like at that time, like being around him? What was he like? What was the atmosphere like? And it must have been pretty charged atmosphere, probably quite intense. Describe that period and how what was like living that moment or those days.
Yes, I came on in September after the Meech Lake Accord, after everything had happened. But of course, I was there, our outside the ledge, and it was quite a time in history because it brought every First Nation in solidarity for one cause, that we are taking pride in ourselves. It lifted up our spirit. It brought all our nations together across Canada. So everyone felt proud. It was an amazing feeling. So when I started with Elijah in September, I remember going into his office, the first floor of the legislative building to your left. And I went to the office. There were boxes, and they have cathedral ceilings in the ledge. The boxes were to the ceiling. There was no pathway. I almost cried. Those were letters from across Canada and the world in support of his position that he took to stand up and speak up for First Nations people, that we are the original peoples of this country, yet we were not consulted or considered in the amendments that they were trying to make in the Meech Lake Accord. So when I started with him, I was marveled at how much he could function under pressure. There was tremendous pressure in the ledge, pressure from other governments. There was threats. There was threats on his life. He had to go into hiding, and he had security. But when I started and started working for him, the invitations were outstanding. I don't think any other leader had those type of invitations and letters and inquiries, because he was global, national icon that everyone wanted for him to speak. But he still had to maintain his duties as an NDP member of the Legislative Assembly. So he had a double duty, but he really was one of the most kindest, down-to-earth individuals I have ever known. I've witnessed him in intense meetings that I would have crawled out of, but he composed himself, maintained his composure, because he spoke the truth all the time. He always made reference to our land, the treaties. We are entrenched in the constitutions. We are people of the land. We care for the land. We are the first peoples of our land. So he really always reiterated that in a lot of meetings. He stuck to the point, even though it was difficult things to say, and the tension you could cut with a knife. He always remained composed. He was never nervous, and I was always amazed at that. But when he was angry, whenever he did get angry at someone, which was rare, I wouldn't want to be the person on the other end, because rarely was he ever angry. He always was for the youth. He was always talking about what it meant to be a leader. our community members vote in a leader. And that's what you got to look at when you see the leaders of a community. They have a tremendous weight on their shoulder. They have tremendous responsibilities. He always spoke up for that. And the youth, he always maintained that you're a leader in your own right as a youth. He always spoke up for the importance of maintaining your connection to the land, to exercising and practicing your hunting and fishing rights and going out into your traditional territory. He goes, never forget about the land where you come from. And he always made a point. Every September, he went into his traditional territories in Red Sucker Lake for a week or, 2 weeks. That's how he grounded himself. And he always got a moose. I don't know how the guy did it, but he would always come back to Ottawa after his holiday. He'd be refreshed. He'd be ready to fight. And I'm just realizing how honored I was and privileged to work for such an individual.
Yeah. Was that here in Ottawa when he was a member of parliament?
He was a member of parliament from 1993 for 3 years, and he lost in the next election. But even running, he crossed the floor. He was a member of the NDP for 11 years. And in 1993, he walked the floor and he ran Liberal against Rod Murphy.
Yes.
Yeah, and then he moved to Ottawa. We all moved to Ottawa.
Yeah, I remember that time when he was here. He used to always have this annual Christmas party at his house and with his wife, and they'd host a beautiful Christmas party. And we were fortunate enough to be invited there a couple of times, and I may have seen you there. But, there were so many people there that he had so many friends and so many supporters, and it was really sad when he passed away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was devastating.
Yeah.
It's coming up on May, I believe it's May 17th is when.
All right.
Yeah.
Language and cultural revitalization is an important issue now facing Indigenous peoples across our country. What are your thoughts on this issue?
My thoughts on this issue is that, to me, personally speaking, that's the only thing that's going to save our people, is to go back and learn your culture and your language and your values and the teachings that were taught by your grandparents. Our young people are missing that in today's society. I don't know how it can be done, but I made connection when we spoke about, what it meant for the apology. To me, the apology means opening up different doors now so that we can have programs nationally to address culture and language for our young people to learn, to get it right into the schools, for it to be mandatory in the schools so that it will regain their confidence. It will give them pride in themselves. We are in a real not so good state. And I believe that's the only thing that will help them. When you have an identity and you know where you come from and you know your language and you know the history of your community, that really, really grounds you and it gives you a sense of confidence. And I really believe that. And I think it's happening. I believe it's happening now, like with the reconciliation talks in Canada. I believe that institutions and organizations are starting to see the relevance of this and starting to see where the gap is, and they're starting to close that gap. And I think with the apology, that it's telling the truth. When you speak the truth, to me, that's your step to reconciliation.
Yeah.
And to me, the truth, we have a lot of truth that we have to acknowledge. The truth of our poverty, the truth of our housing conditions, the truth of the social injustices, the truth of substandard housing. That's what it all leads into. But it's a start, and it's starting in Canada.
Yeah. How do you feel about the Pope's apology and about him coming to Canada? Do you see that as a positive or a negative?
Me personally speaking, I see it as a positive. Hope is the anchor to everything. And for me to witness watching the Pope apologize, and to me, when you're apologizing, you're acknowledging the truth of what happened to our people in Canada, the legacy of abuse in Canada nationwide. When he's coming to Canada on our land and apologizing, it's going to resonate across Canada, and at least it's a start in the right direction, because what it's going to show the rest of Canada is that all these abuses that we have been talking about and lobbying and negotiating through different agreements, that it did happen. It is the truth. And the truth is acknowledged by the Pope, head of the Vatican, coming to Canada, is acknowledging a truth. So to me, it's a step in the right direction. I always say that healing is personal. It's very personal. And if the apology doesn't apply to a lot of survivors, that's personal to them, and they have their own reasons, because trauma is something that happens inside of you, not to you, and it's hard to talk about. So Canada, to me, they're sitting in their living rooms and they're witnessing all of this. And you know, and I know, Gord, that a lot of times with First Nations issues, you know, people tend to say, why don't the First Nations get over it? Well, you know what? We can't get over what happened, and the truth has to be acknowledged, and we have to feel a sense of validation. And to me, the Pope apologizing is validation, and it's a start in the right direction.
Well said. Thank you. My final question is on reconciliation, which is kind of appropriate to what you just said. How do you feel about this whole question about reconciliation? And what do Canadians need to do to make Canada a better country to live in for all Canadians?
Well, reconciliation, it has to be, again, reconciliation starts with the truth. And the truth has started to be told. We witnessed through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission when they went across Canada with Honorable Judge Murray Sinclair, head of the commission. It was viewed on national television that the disclosures of the stories of the survivors, it was all across Canada. It was publicized. It was on national TV. So to me, that would resonate with the greater, larger public, that they've seen the disclosures and the pain and the suffering that the survivors were speaking about. So reconciliation is happening, and it's happening in a lot of ways. I can give an example here in Manitoba, where we were talking about where we get our water from in Manitoba. Our water comes from a First Nations reserve across the border in Shoal Lake number 40. At that time, when there was a lobbying group that came together, and it was all non-Native people and First Nations people that came together for that cause, to fight for that. And it was really amazing to see at the legislative grounds. That to me is reconciliation. Other reconciliations are, you know, people looking and being apathetic about the MMIW inquiry. This is happening. Our women are going missing, and our young men. So with greater, larger public empathetic towards that, and understanding and finding common ground and wanting to help us in different ways, I see groups out here coming together. When we have marches out here with MMIW, it's a lot of people coming together. Non-Native people, First Nations people, Métis people, everyone is coming together, because that could be a woman's sister or child. Another one is the day school that's upon us, the application process. You know, it's opening up the doors. It's starting to recognize and be compassionate and look at agreements, and they are granted through the courts and through wherever that, you know, you can apply for your time at day school. I see a lot of forums. I see a lot of people coming together, and it's really important that the young people get involved. I just lost my frame of thinking. But anyways, it is happening. That's reconciliation. What Canadians can do, they can start lobbying and talking to their member of parliaments and their members of the legislative assemblies. They can start talking to their directors of education, to the private sector, the corporate sector, talking to the governments to say this is the truth of what's happening. How can we help them? Can we have meetings? Can we come together and have town hall meetings? And let's talk. I always tell people too that our summer is coming upon us, and there's a lot of powwows that are happening in Manitoba here. I always tell our non-Native friends, don't be afraid to go to that powwow, because we would welcome you. We want you to learn our culture. We want you to see our dances. We want you to feel a part of this. But they always say, it's just a perception that they have. They don't feel that they can go or that they're allowed to go. I said, you are. It's open. Right. Come and sit on the bench and take in a culture and ask questions.
Yeah.
Our people are, we're not going to turn you away.
Right. Yeah. I think what you said about the truth coming out, really is the beginning of this country developing reconciliation, reconciling with each other. It's kind of like, almost like a family discovering, all the bad things that the history of their family has done. The truth hurts, but it makes you stronger, I think, as a unit, when you know the bad truth about what the history of your family or the history of your country did, then you become to heal, you come together stronger as a unit, as a group, as a country. So I really like the way you talked about that. And I want to thank you for taking the time to do this, Jennifer. I've been talking to Jennifer Wood, survivor from Manitoba. She now resides in Winnipeg, working for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Thank you very much on behalf of the Legacy Hope Foundation. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
You bet, Gord. It was good talking to you.
Thank you.